Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Let me turn off the music. Yeah. Welcome back. How are we all doing? Happy Tuesday. Tuesday Blues Day. Just kidding. I'm in a pretty good mood today, actually. So, let's see. In the last chapter, I believe in the last chapter, Captain Nemo led Arana and Ned and Conseil in a bit of a fight. Nautical. I love it. That'll really bring in the uh the views if I say I'm being nautical. Anyway, in the last chapter, the captain seems to have led the crew through a bit of a fight with someone. Um, I believe over a shark. And they brought someone back to life, I believe. Um, so yeah, it seems that our narrator, Arnaud, is kind of in awe of the captain and his strange ways. So, okay. So this next chapter, chapter 4, is called The Red Sea. During the day of the 29th of January, that is so weird. I've been reading this book, like every time I open it, I feel like I'm right where I'm supposed to start. Because today is the 28th of January. So that's weird. It's like I'm reading the book the way that it actually happens, like time-wise. Okay, during the day of the 29th of January, the island of Ceylon disappeared over the horizon, and the Nautilus, at a speed of 20 knots, entered into that labyrinth of channels that separates the Maldives from the Laccadives. We even cruised past the island of Kiltan, coral in origin, and which was discovered by Vasco da Gama in 1499. One of the 19 main islands of the Laccadive archipelago, situated between latitude 10° and 14° 30 degrees north, and longitude 69° and 50° 72 degrees east. We had traveled 16,220 miles, or 7,500 leagues, from our point of departure to the Sea of Japan. On the following day, the 30th of January, when the Nautilus rose once more to the surface of the ocean, there was no land in sight. Of course, our course was north-northeast, and we were heading toward the Gulf of Oman, lying between the Arabian mainland and the Indian peninsula, and providing an entrance to the Persian Gulf. It was evidently a dead end, without any possible outlet. Where was Captain Nemo taking us? I couldn't say. But that did not satisfy the Canadian, who had asked me where we were going. "We are going, Master Ned, where the captain's whims will take us." "Those whims," replied the Canadian, "cannot make us very far. The Persian Gulf has no outlet, and if we enter it, it will not be long before he can come back out again." "Then we shall simply come back out again, Master Ned, and if after the Persian Gulf the Nautilus takes a notion to visit the Red Sea, the Strait of I'm trying to fix my mic, sorry guys. El Mandeb will always be there to let us through." "I don't have to tell you, sir," replied Ned Land, "that the Red Sea, like the Persian Gulf, has no outlet. The Isthmus of Suez has not yet been completed, and even if it were, a mysterious boat, such as ours, couldn't take any chances in a canal equipped with locks. So the Red Sea is not, at the moment, the way that will bring us to Europe." "I did not say that we were returning to Europe." "Well, what do you think is going to happen?" "I think that after visiting the exotic coasts of Arabia and Egypt, the Nautilus will return to the Indian Ocean, perhaps through the Mozambique Channel, or perhaps around the Mascarene Islands, and then head straight for the Cape of Good Hope." "And once at the Cape of Good Hope, then what?" asked the Canadian in his insistent manner. "Well, it is possible that we may sail into the Atlantic, which we have not yet explored. It is evident, Ned, that you are getting tired of this voyage under the sea. These endless visions of the marvels of the sea bore you. As far as am concerned, Ned, I should regret the end of a journey which few men will ever have the opportunity to take." You put him in his place. Arenaud. "But you realize, Monsieur Arenaud," the Canadian answered, "that we have been prisoners aboard the Nautilus for almost 3 months?" "No, Ned, I did not realize it, and I do not wish to. I am counting neither the days nor the hours." "But when will it end?" "The end will come in good time. Besides, we can do nothing about it, and it is useless to argue. If you ever come to me, my good Ned, and said, 'We have a chance to escape,' I will discuss that with you. But such is not the case now, and, to be frank with you, I do not think Captain Nemo will ever venture into European waters." It can be readily seen from this conversation that, having such a fanatic on the subject of the Nautilus, I was beginning to identify myself with its commander. Ned Land ended the conversation, muttering words as if to himself. "That's all very well, but in my opinion, one cannot be happy unless one is free." It's interesting, like, we're starting to explore this juxtaposition in the book of, like, freedom versus imprisonment, I guess, in this book. Yeah, and I'm just wondering how that will come to fruition later, or what that will, like, mean for our characters. For 4 days, until the 3rd of February, the Nautilus roamed the Gulf of Oman at various speeds and depths. It seemed to be cruising at random, as if uncertain which route to take, but it never crossed the Tropic of Cancer. On leaving this sea we caught a glimpse of Muscat, the most important town in the country of Oman. I admired its exotic appearance, built as it was amid the black cliffs that surrounded it, on which its white houses and forests stood out in bold relief. I saw the rounded domes of its mosques, the elegant spires of its minarets, and its fresh green terraces. But it was no more than a passing vision, for as soon as the Nautilus plunged once more beneath the waves of dark coastal waters, then, at a distance of 6 miles, we skirted the Arabian coast of Maharad and Hadramaut, its undulating ridge of mountains relieved only by an occasional ancient ruin. On the 5th of February we finally entered the Gulf of Aden, a veritable funnel that led into the neck of Bab el Mandeb, through which the waters of the Indian Ocean pour into the Red Sea. On the 6th of February the Nautilus came within sight of Aden, perched on a promontory and connected to the mainland by a narrow isthmus, an inaccessible Gibraltar, whose fortifications were restored by the English after its capture in 1893. I caught a glimpse of the octagonal minarets of the town, which, according to the historian Edrisi, had once been the richest commercial center along the coast. I was certain that Captain Nemo, having reached this point, would now turn back. To my great surprise, he did no such thing. On the next day, the 7th of February, we entered the Strait of Bab el Mandeb, whose name in Arabic means the Gate of Tears. This strait is about 30 miles long and 20 miles wide, and for the Nautilus, traveling at top speed, sailing through it was just a matter of an hour. I saw nothing on the way, not even the Perim Island, fortified by the British for the defense of Aden. There were, in this strait, too many English and French steamers plying the routes between Suez and Bombay, Calcutta and Melbourne, Bourbon and Motrice, for the Nautilus to cruise in open sea. So she moved at a prudent depth beneath the waters. Finally, at noon, we entered the Red Sea. The Red Sea, that famous lake of biblical tradition, is rarely refreshed by rains and never replenished by any important stream. Its evaporation is incessant and excessive, so that the water level drops by about 5,000 feet a year. A strange lake indeed. If it were closed off all around, it would perhaps have dried up completely. Its level is lower than that of our neighbors, the Captain and the Dead Sea, whose levels remain constant, since their evaporation is equal to the waters that flow into their basins. The Red Sea is 1,600 miles long and has an average width of about 150 miles. In the days of the Ptolemies and the Roman emperors, it was a great commercial artery of the world, which the building with the building of the Suez Canal, the region will regain much of its prestige, a prestige that the Suez railways have already partly recovered. I did not even try to understand the whim that had led Captain Nemo to bring us to this gulf, but I approved wholeheartedly of the Nautilus's having entered it. We traveled at a moderate speed, sometimes on the surface, sometimes diving to avoid a ship. I was therefore able to observe both the upper and lower strata of this very strange sea. On the 8th of February, in the early hours of the morning, we came in sight of Mocha, a town now in ruins, whose walls would crumble at the mere sound of a cannon. An occasional date tree grows here and there. At one time it was a city of considerable importance, with 6 public markets and 26 mosques. Its walls, defended by 14 forts, were about 2 miles in circumference. Then the Nautilus approached the shores of Africa, where the sea is considerably deeper. Through the open panels, its waters clear and crystal, we were fascinated at the sight of marvelous shrubs of dazzling corals, at huge masses of rocks covered with the resplendent tapestry of green algae and Fuji. What indescribable and ever-changing spectacles appeared along the coast of Libya! What colorful landscapes, whose beauty was enhanced by steep reefs and small volcanic islands! And how beautiful were the shrub-like forms that appeared on the eastern shores as the Nautilus cruised slowly on the surface of the sea. Along the coast of Tahama, the zoophytes were not only flourished beneath the sea, but formed an intricate and picturesque lacework that rose 60 feet above the water. It sounds beautiful. The latter were more whimsical in shape, but less colorful than the former, whose freshness is kept vivid by the water. How many delightful hours I spent looking through those panels of the saloon! How many new specimens of underwater flora and fauna I admired beneath the gleams of our searchlight! Agaric fungoids, slate-colored sea anemones, and Thalassinithus aster, among others, tubular pores shaped like flutes, waiting only for the breath of the god Pan to produce music. Conchs peculiar to these waters, spiral-shaped at the base, inhabiting the hollows of madreporic formations. Finally, thousands of specimens of polypary, which I had not seen, the common sponge. Okay, so I just recently added a viewer reward where if there are any words that pop up while I'm reading that you'd like a definition on, you can go ahead and use your viewer rewards to request a dictionary lookup. I'm gonna test around with this award. Maybe there will be other ways to use it, and maybe it will become there will be another way to use dictionary time, but for now, I'm going to use it myself for the word polypary. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my viewer rewards, or my channel points, sorry, and I'm going to go to, I must have done it. Oh, there it is, dictionary time. And I'm going to say, yeah. Okay. Alan, 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 Alan. Okay. So I'm going to look up the definition. Okay. The common investing structure or tissue in which the polyps of coral and other compound forms are embedded. And here's a picture. Hell yeah. Alan, you like that we have the chat? We got the chat on screen. What's up? I am up in my Twitch game, baby. We got dictionary time. We got chat on screen. We're hanging out. We're reading a book. It's getting lit up in here on a Tuesday night. Thanks, man. Reynolds fought like me. I feel accomplished for figuring this stuff out. Alan, thank you for being here. I'm excited to see you. Throw your high-low kudos in the chat while you're here. I want to know about your goddamn day. Anyway. Okay, shall we continue? Okay. Highs, lows, kudos, how dare you? Well, I mean, you don't have to answer, but like, you know, I like knowing about everyone's days. Like, come on. Okay. Well, you tell me about that. The common sponge, first in the order of polyps, is a strange and curious product whose usefulness is indisputable. The sponge is not a plant, as some naturalists will maintain, but an animal of the lowest species, a polyp inferior to that of coral. Its animal nature is not in question, and we cannot possibly accept the opinion of the ancients, who regarded it as an intermediary species between the plant and the animal. I must say, however, that naturalists do not agree about the structure of the sponge. For some, it is a polyp. For others, like M. Milne Edwards, it is a category all its own. The class taking interest in people's day and shit. Okay, I'm going to read the next next paragraph, and then I'll read your high-low kudos. The class of the sponges contained about 300 species. They are found in most seas, and some of them in certain rivers. 30 minutes. In which have been given the name fluvitiles. But their favorite waters are those of the Mediterranean, the Greek archipelagos, the coasts of Syria, and the Red Sea. There we find sponges of the best quality, whose price can go up to 150 francs. The blonde Syrian sponge, the hard Barbary sponge, etc. But since I could not hope to study these zoophytes in the seaports of Levant, because we were separated by the insuperable isthmus of Suez, I was happy to observe them in the waters of the Red Sea. I called Conseil to my side while the Nautilus, at an average depth of 25 to 30 feet, sailed slowly past those beautiful rocks on the eastern coast. Sponges of all kinds and shape grow here. Pediculated, foliated, globular, and digital. They well deserve the names given them by fishermen, such as baskets, chalices, distaffs, elk's horn, lion's foot, peacock's tail, Neptune's glove. Fishermen, it seems, are better poets than scientists. From their fibrous tissue infused with semi-fluid, gelatinous substance, there trickles a tiny stream of water, which is expelled by a contracting substance disappeared at the death of the polyp, but releases ammonia as it decomposes. Nothing is left except the horny and gelatinous fibers that constitute the domestic sponge. They are put to various uses according to their degrees of elasticity, permeability, and resistance to wear and tear. That whole sentence just seemed incredibly dirty. Those polyps we saw were clinging to rocks, to the shells of mollusks, and even to the stems of hydrophytes. They decorate every nook and turn of the rocks, they're spreading out, others standing uptight, and still others hanging like growths of coral. I explained to Conseil that these sponges were gathered in two ways, dredging or by hand. The latter, of course, requires the use of divers. This was preferable because it does not damage the fibers of the polypary, and therefore brought better prices. Other zoophytes that swarmed around the sponges consisted primarily of the very elegant kind of medusa. The mollusks were represented by varieties of squid which, according to Orbigay, are peculiar to the Red Sea, and the reptiles that represented by the vergata turtles belonging to the genus Chelonia were supplied our table with wholesome and delicate dishes. As for fish, they were abundant and often unusual. Here are some that the nets of the Nautilus most frequently hauled aboard. Oh God, here we go. He's about to just list fish. Brick red oval-shaped rays, marked with blue spots and recognized by their double set of stingers. Silver-backed arnax, whiptail stingrays. Bockets, about 6 feet long, flapping through the waters like empty overcoats. Adons, without a single tooth in their mouths, although related to the sharks. Dromedariostrancions, whose hump ends in a curled needle a foot and a half long. Ophidians, vertebral marine eels with silvery tails, bluish dorsals, brown pectoral fins tinted with gray. Phi Phaetolae, a species of Stromentidae, striped with narrow gold and decked with 3 colors of the French flag. Blennies, 15 inches long, superb specimens of Caranexes, dedicated with 7 transverse black stripes with blue and yellow fins and gold and silver scales. Centropods, flame gold mullets and yellow heads, gobbies, parrotfish, rockfish, etc., and 1,000 other fish common to the oceans we had already explored. I feel like I deserve a bow for reading that paragraph, so I'm gonna just take one. Thank you very much. On the 9th of February, the Nautilus was sailing in the widest part of the Red Sea, lying between Salchin on the west coast and Cunfedah on the east, 109 miles apart. That day at noon, after taking our bearings, Captain Nemo came up to the platform where I was standing. I promised myself not to let him leave without at least asking him about his future plans. When he saw me, he came to me and graciously offered me a cigar. "Well, Monsieur le Professeur," he said, "how do you like the Red Sea? Have you observed all the wonders it offers? Have you studied its fish, its zoophytes, its sponge beds, its coral forests? Have you noticed all the towns nestled along its shore?" "Yes, Captain Nemo," I replied, "and the Nautilus has lent itself magnificently to all my studies. What a remarkable craft!" "Yes, monsieur, intelligent, bold, and invulnerable. It fears neither the terrible storms of the Red Sea, nor its currents, nor its reefs." "As a matter of fact," I said, "this sea has always been considered among the worst, and, unless I'm mistaken, it is absolutely detested by the ancients." "Yes, it was certainly detested, Monsieur Aronnax. The Greek and the Latin historians have little good to say about it, and Strabo," and then there's a footnote, Greek geographer and historian, that's who Strabo is, "maintained that it is particularly dangerous during the period of the Estian winds and the rainy season. The Arabian Edrisi, who refers to it as the Gulf of Kulzum, tells us how ships perished in great numbers on its sandbanks, and that no one dared navigate it by night. It is, he claimed, a sea subject to terrible hurricanes, strewn and unfriendly isles, and with not much to offer beneath or above its surface. In fact, the same opinion is now shared by Arian Agathyrasides Artemidorus. "One can readily see," I answered, "that these writers had never sailed on the Nautilus." "I am afraid not," replied the captain. "When it comes to that, I do not see that the moderns are much more advanced than the ancients. It took several centuries to discover steam. It may take another century before we may see another Nautilus. Progress is so slow, Monsieur le Professeur." "Certainly," I replied. "Your ship is a century ahead of its time, perhaps even more. What a shame such a secret should have to die with its inventor." Captain Nemo did not answer. After a few moments, however, he continued. "You are speaking of ancient historians and what they thought of the dangers of sailing in the Red Sea, were you not?" "Yes, indeed. But do you not think their fears are somewhat exaggerated?" "Yes and no, Monsieur Aronnax," said Captain Nemo, with an assurance that indicated a vast knowledge concerning the Red Sea. "What is no longer a danger to modern ships, which are well rigged, solidly built, and in perfect control, thanks to the invention of steam, presented all sorts of dangers to the vessels of the ancients. Just imagine venturing on the sea in boats built with planks, held together with palm ropes, smeared with powdered resin, and covered with the fat of dogfish. They had no instruments to chart their course, but they navigated by guesswork, driven only by their own resources in waters they barely knew. Under such conditions, shipwrecks were inevitable, but in our day steamers plying between Suez and the South Sea have nothing to fear from the furies of this gulf in spite of its prevailing monsoons. Their captains and passengers no longer need to offer proprietary sacrifices before their departure, nor is there need to wear garlands and golden wreaths on their return to appease their gods. I agree, I said. The steam seems to have killed all gratitude in the heart of the seaman. But, Captain, since you appear to have studied this sea with particular care, can you tell me the origin of its name? There are, Monsieur Arenat, many theories about that. Would you care to know the opinion of a chronicler of the 14th century? Yes, indeed. The imaginative person claims that its name was given to the Red Sea after the passage of Israelites, when Pharaoh perished in the waters that closed around him at Moses' command. Okay, and then there's something in French, but there's an English translation, so I'm going to read that. To commemorate that marvel, the sea turned red and vermilion. What else could one call it then, except the Red Sea? A poet's explanation, Captain Nemo, I replied, but I do not find it altogether satisfactory. To me, what is your personal opinion? My opinion, Monsieur Arenat, is that the name Red Sea is a translation of the Hebrew word Edom, and if its ancients gave it its name, it was because of the special color of the waters. Until now, however, I have seen only clear water without any particular color. No doubt. But as we get closer to the end of the gulf, you will observe the strange phenomena. I remember having seen the Bay of Tor completely red, like a lake of blood. Do you attribute this color to the presence of microscopic algae? Yes, but it is a sticky purple substance produced by little tiny plants known as trichodesmia. It takes millions of them to occupy 1 square inch. Perhaps you will see this phenomena when you reach Tor. So, Captain Nemo, this is not the first time you have sailed the Red Sea aboard the Nautilus? No, monsieur. A little while ago you spoke about the passage of the Israelites and the catastrophe that befell the Egyptians. May I ask you whether you have found evidence of that great historical event beneath the surface of the waters? No, Professor, and for very good reason, which is the spot where Moses crossed with his people is now so sandbound that camels can hardly bathe their legs. I need not tell you the Nautilus would not have enough water in which to navigate. And where is that spot? I asked. A little above Suez. It is the sound that once formed a deep estuary when the Red Sea extended as far as the Salt Lakes. Now, whether that passage was miraculous or not, the Israelites did cross that plain to reach the Promised Land, and Pharaoh's army did perish at that point. I think that if excavations were undertaken under those sands, a great quantity of arms and tools of Egyptian origin would be discovered. That is obvious, I replied. Let us hope that one of these days archaeologists who are ambitious enough to make a reputation for themselves will undertake these excavations, especially after the Suez is completed and new towns are built on this isthmus. However, the canal is not much use to a ship such as the Nautilus. True, of course, but very useful for the rest of the world, said the captain. The ancients understood only too well the importance, for commercial reasons, of connecting the Red Sea and the Mediterranean, but they did not dream of building a direct canal they chose the way of the Nile. Very probably the canal which joined the Nile to the Red Sea was first begun by Sesmostus, if tradition may be believed. What is certain is that in 615 BC, Necos undertook the construction of a canal fed by the rivers of the Nile across the Egyptian plain facing Arabia. This canal could be traveled in 4 days, and its width was such that 2 trimeres could pass each other. It was continued by Darius, son of Hestapes, and probably finished by Ptolemy II. Strabo saw it used for navigation, but because it sloped down gently from its source near Budatis to the Red Sea, it was navigable only by a few months of the year. This canal served commerce until the time of Antinous. It was abandoned because it filled up with sand. It was then restored on orders of Caliph Omar. It was finally finished up to 761 or 762 by Caliph al-Mansur, who wished to prevent provisions reaching Mohammed ben Abdullah, who had rebelled against him. During the Egyptian campaign, your General Bonaparte found traces of these works in the desert of Suez. Surprised by the tide, he almost perished a few hours before reaching Hadjorth, in the same place where Moses had camped 3,300 years before him. At any rate, Captain, what the ancients did not dare to undertake, the junction between 2 seas which would shorten the route from Cadiz to the Indies by 56,000 miles, the Lesbos was undertaken, and before long we will have transformed Africa into a huge island. Yes, Monsieur Arenat, you have every reason to be proud of your countryman. He is a man who bestows a greater honor to a nation than his greatest captains. Like many others, he has had to face only hardships and frustration, but he has triumphed, and he possesses the will of a genius. But it is deplorable to think that this great work of his, which should have been an international undertaking, and which could have brought glory to any one nation, will owe its success to the energies of one single man. All honor, then, to Monsieur de Lesbos. Yes, all honor to that great citizen, I replied, much surprised by the feeling with which Captain Nemo had just spoken. Unfortunately, he continued, I will not be able to take you through the Suez Canal, but you will be able to gaze at the long promontories of Port Said the day after tomorrow, when we shall be sailing to the Mediterranean. In the Mediterranean? I cried. Yes, Monsieur le Professeur, in the Mediterranean. Does that surprise you? What astonishes me is that we will be there the day after tomorrow." "Really?" "Yes, Captain, although I should no longer be surprised at anything in view of what has happened since you took me aboard. But why should you be so surprised?" "I'm thinking of the fantastic speed at which you must travel to sail around Africa, double the Cape of Good Hope, and be in the Mediterranean the day after tomorrow." "And what makes you think the Nautilus is going around Africa, Professor? Who has said anything about doubling the Cape of Good Hope?" "How else, Captain, unless the Nautilus can sail on dry land, or pass over the isthmus—" "Or sail under it, my dear Professor?" "Under it? Why not?" replied the captain calmly. "A long time ago nature created under this strip of land what man is now creating on its surface." "What? You mean that there is a passage underground?" "Yes, an underground passage, which I have named the Arabian Tunnel. It runs under the Suez and flows to the Gulf of Pelusium." This is crazy. This kind of like feeds into this like science fiction nature that people say that this book is, because this book was written like before the dawn of submarines, and I guess based on what they're trying to suggest, like before they understood that that isn't possible. But really interesting. They're like, we're gonna go under Africa, actually. But isn't this isthmus? Oh wait, hold on. Where did I go? What? You mean a passage underground? Yes, an underground passage, which I have named the Arabian Tunnel. It runs under the Suez and flows to the Gulf of Pelusium. But isn't this isthmus formed on shifting sands? Down to a certain depth, yes, but about 175 feet down there is nothing but solid rock." "Did you discover this passage by chance?" I asked, absolutely astonished. "By chance and by reasoning, Monsieur le Professeur, but more by reasoning than by chance. As I listen to you, Captain, I find that my ears can scarcely believe what they hear. Ah, Monsieur, aures habemet et non audiant." They have ears, but hear not. It is an eternal truth. Not only does this underground passage exist, but I have used it several times. Without it, I would not have ventured into this dead end, the Red Sea. Would it be presumptuous to ask how you discovered this tunnel?" "Monsieur," replied the captain, "there can be no secrets between people who will never separate." I pretended not to get to the point and simply waited for the captain's story. "Monsieur le Professeur," he began, "it is the simple reasoning of a naturalist that led me to the discovery of the passage. Only I know of its existence. I had noticed that the Red Sea and the Mediterranean there were many fishes that were identical. Ophidia, Fiators, Gillies, Extrasotii, Persage, and Jules. Having assured myself of this fact, I asked myself whether any communication existed between the two seas. If so, the underground current had obviously to flown from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean, simply because of the difference in their levels. I therefore fished a great number of specimens in the Suez waters. I passed a copper ring through their tails and threw them back into the sea. A few months later, off the coast of Syria, I caught some of them again, identified by their copper rings. I had therefore proved that there was some passage between the two seas. I looked for it in my Nautilus, discovered it, sailed through it, And before long, Professor, you too will have traveled through my Arabian tunnel. Hell yeah, dude. You know, do you feel the romantic tension between Captain Nemo and Aronnax? Maybe it's just me, but I don't know. I feel it. Okay, so I guess they're about to pass under Africa, and that was the end of chapter 4. So the next one is chapter 5, where we will travel through the Arabian Tunnel in all of 8 pages. Okay. Chapter 5, the Arabian Tunnel. Secret tunnel, secret tunnel under Africa. Secret, 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 secret tunnel. On that same day, I reported to Conseil and Ned that part of the conversation that I knew was of special thank you, was of special interest to them. When I told them that within 2 days we would be sailing in the Mediterranean, Conseil clapped his hands with glee, and the Canadian shrugged his shoulders. "An underground passage!" he cried. "A passage between the 2 seas? Who ever heard of such a thing?" "Listen, Ned," replied Conseil. Oh, wait, sorry, that was Ned. "An underground passage!" he cried. "A passage between the 2 seas? Who would have heard of such a thing?" "Listen, Ned," replied Conseil. "You have never heard of the Nautilus, had you? No, but it does exist. You shouldn't shrug your shoulders so readily, and don't reject the existence of something just because you've never heard of it." "Well, this we will know soon enough," replied Ned, shaking his head. "After all, nothing would please me more than to believe in the existence of this tunnel, and I hope to God that we will soon be sailing in the Mediterranean." That same evening, in latitude 21° 30' north, the Nautilus, floating on the surface of the sea, approached the Arabian coast. Jeddah, the important trading center of Egypt, Syria, Turkey, and India, came into view. I could see clearly the cluster of buildings, ships moored at the quays, and other ships anchored offshore. The sun, low on the horizon, made the white buildings of the town stand out in gold relief. On the outskirts of the town, the Bedouin quarter, built of wood and rushes, was clearly visible. Soon, in the shadow of the evening, Jeddah disappeared from our view, and the Nautilus dived beneath the waves, which were tinged with phosphorescent lights. Next day, February 10th, several ships appeared, sailing in the opposite direction. The Nautilus once more had to submerge in the depths of the sea. But at midday, when we took our bearings, the sea was deserted, and we sailed again on the surface of the water. Accompanied by Ned and Conseil, I went up to the platform. The coast to the east was barely visible through the mist. Leaning against the dinghy, we were chatting of this and that, when Ned, pointing to the distance, said, "Look, Professor, can you see anything over there?" "No, Ned," I replied, "but my eyesight is not as sharp as yours, as you know." "Look carefully," he continued. "Over there, on the starboard beam, roughly at the level of the searchlight. Don't you see a mass which appears to be moving?" "Oh, yes," I said. "I see it now. Something that looks like a black body floating on the water." "Another Nautilus?" remarked Conseil. "No," replied the Canadian. "I may be wrong, but it looks like a sea animal." "Are there whales in the Red Sea?" Conseil asked. "Yes, my lad, occasionally they are seen in these waters." "It isn't a whale," commented Ned, who kept his eyes fixed on the black object. "The whales and I are old friends. I could not be mistaken by their looks. "Let us be patient," said Conseil. "The Nautilus is heading in that direction, and we will know what it is shortly." Soon that blackish object could not be more than a mile away. It resembled a black reef stranded in the middle of an open ocean. What could it be? I wondered. "Ah, it's moving! It's diving!" shouted Ned. "Great heavens, what can it be? It doesn't have the forked tail of a whale or of a cachalot, and its fins resemble the stumps and limbs." "But what could it be, then?" I cried. "Well," said the Canadian, "read a page in a British accent." All right, I'm going to finish this page in American accent. "Well," said the Canadian, "there she is on her back with her teats up in the air." "It's a siren," said Conseil, "a real siren, if I may be permitted to say so." All right, y'all ready for some British behavior? That word siren cleared up the matter for me. I realized that this animal belonged to the order of sea animals that had inspired the ancients to create fables of a mermaid, half woman, half fish. "No," I said to Conseil, "it is not a siren, but a strange creature nevertheless. It is only specimens remain in the Red Sea. It is a dugong, order of Sirenia, division of Pisciformes, subclass of Monodelphinians, class of mammals, branch of vertebrates," answered Conseil. "Tuesday." And after this there was nothing more to be said. Ned kept his eyes fixed on the subject. His eyes were ablaze with excitement. His hand seemed ready to launch his harpoon. He looked as if he were waiting for the right moment to plunge into the sea and come to grips with that animal and its native haunts. "Ah, monsieur," he said, trembling with excitement, "I have never struggled with an animal like that, all of that being concentrated on the utterance of the word 'that.'" At that moment Captain Nemo appeared on the platform. He spotted his dugong, the dugong, looked at Ned, understood, and addressed himself directly to Ned. "If you had a harpoon in your hands, wouldn't it be burning your fingers now?" "Most assuredly, sir." "And wouldn't you like to take up your old trade again, just for a day, and add this crustacean to the list of your trophies?" "I shall like to do that very much, sir." "Very well, then. Go ahead, by all means." "Thank you, sir," answered Ned, whose eyes were ablaze. "However," continued the captain, "for your own good, I would advise you not to miss." "Is it dangerous to attack these animals?" I asked, in spite of the captain's shrug of his shoulders. "Yes, they are dangerous sometimes," answered the captain. "They have a way of turning on their assailants and overturning their boats. However, Master Land need not fear of this danger. His arm is strong, and his arm is certain. I am merely suggesting that he do not miss, because the dugong is regarded as an exquisite dish, and I know that Master Land does not scorn a tasty morsel." All right, that was the British accent. Thank you for redeeming that, Alan. I knew it was going to happen eventually. That was exciting. I enjoyed that. And you too can hear me in a British accent for 1,400 channel points. I think I upped it by like 200 today. Retorted the Canadian, "I'm delighted to hear that." "Yes, Master Land, its excellent flesh is verily highly esteemed, and in Malaya it is reserved for the tables." I'd still left over. I was like, tables. "The tables of princes. For this reason, a relentless hunt goes on for this excellent animal that, like the manatee, its close relative is becoming more and more rare. If that is the case, said Conseil, in a serious vein, the dugong will be the last of its race, and perhaps it would be better to spare it in the interest of science. Perhaps, answered the Canadian, it will be better to hunt it, and in the interest of the kitchen. Go ahead, Master Land, said the captain. Just then, several men of the crew, silent and impassive as always, appeared on the platform. One carried a harpoon and a line such as used by the whalers. The dinghy was removed from the socket and lowered to the water. 6 oarsmen took their places, and the mate moved to the tiller. Ned, Conseil, and I sat in the stern. Are you coming, Captain? I asked. No, monsieur, but I wish you all good luck. The dinghy set off, thrust forward by 6 oarsmen. It headed rapidly among the dugong, which was now floating about 2 miles from the Nautilus. When we were a few cables' lengths from the cetacean, the boat slowed down and the oars paddled noiselessly through the quiet waters. Ned Land, harpoon in hand, stood upright in the front of the dinghy. The harpoon used to strike a whale is usually attached to a long rope which unwinds rapidly when the wounded animal pulls it with him. But in this case the rope measured only 10 fathoms, or 60 feet, and its end was attached to a small barrel which, floating on the surface, would indicate the movement of the animal under the water. I stood up and observed closely the Canadian's adversary. The dugong, which is also called a halicore, resembles the manatee. Its oblong body ends in a very long tail, and its lateral fins are like real fingers. It differs from the manatee in that its upper jaw is armed with 2 long, sharp teeth that stick out on either side in its defense. I kind of want to look up, because I keep saying dugong, but I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, so I'm going to make sure I'm saying that right. Dugong. Dugong. Dugong.
Dugong.
Dugong. Oh my god, they're so cute. Oh, okay, so it does look a lot like a manatee. But it has a forked tail. Look at this guy. Hold on. Why would they want to hunt one of these guys? They're so cute. Look at that dugong. Just a happy little dugong. One more. Oh, come on. Look at him. He is vibing. That's me. Dude. Call me dugong. Call me a dugong, because this is the life I'm trying to live. Why are they hunting a dugong, bruh? He's so cute. Okay, last one. I'm sorry. Dugong. Look at that dugong. They don't allow for vibes? What? Dude, have they seen a dugong? Did I get a follower? Armadici. Armadich. Thanks for the follow, man. I missed it. Damn. I guess this is what happens when I'm not looking at my viewfinder. But yay, thanks for the follow. The dinghy set off, thrust forward by its 6 oarsmen. Oh, are you coming, Captain? I asked. No, monsieur. but I wish you all good luck." The dinghy set off, thrust forward by its 6 oarsmen. It headed rapidly toward the dugong, which was now floating about 2 miles from the Nautilus. When we were a few cables' lengths from the crustacean, the boat slowed down and the oars paddled noiselessly through the quiet waters. Ned Land, harpoon in hand, stood upright in the front of the dinghy. The harpoon used to strike a whale is usually... I already read this. I stood up and observed closely the Canadian's adversary. The dugong, which is called the halicore, resembles the manatee. Its long oblong body ends in a very long tail, and its lateral fins are like real fingers. It differs from the manatee in that its upper jaw is armed with 2 long, sharp teeth that stick out on either side of its defense. This dugong that Ned was prepared to attack was of colossal dimensions, and it was, at least, more than 20 feet long. It lay motionless and seemed to be sleeping on the surface of the waves. This made the task of capturing it easier. The dinghy moved cautiously to within 15 or 20 feet of the animal. The oars were resting in their locks. I crouched. Ned Land, his body bent slightly backward, brandished his harpoon with his experienced hand. Suddenly we heard a hissing sound, and the dugong vanished. The harpoon, hurled with powerful strength, seemed to have struck only water. "A thousand devils!" cried the Canadian in anger. "I missed!" Sorry. "No," I shouted. "The animal is wounded. Look at the blood." But your harpoon did not stick in its body." "My harpoon! My harpoon!" shouted Ned. The sailors piled their oars and the mate steered the boat toward the floating barrel. The harpoon was recovered and the dinghy set off in pursuit of the animal. The dugong rose to the surface to breathe from time to time. It could not have hurt much, for it swam with remarkable speed. The boat, maneuvered by strong arms, surged in its wake. On several occasions the animal came within a few yards of us, and the Canadian made ready to strike, but the dugong would suddenly dive and disappear. It was impossible to touch it. The anger of the impatient Canadian knew no bounds. He hurled the most energetic curses to the English language at the poor creature. As for me, I was thoroughly irritated to see that dugong manage to elude all our efforts. We pursued it relentlessly for an hour, and I was beginning to despair of ever capturing it, when the animal, seized with the idea of vengeance, for which it was to repent, turned toward the dinghy and attacked it. This maneuver did not, however, escape the watchful eye of the Canadian. "Be on your guard now!" he shouted. The mate uttered a few words to their strange language, which, without doubt, warning them of danger. Having come within 20 feet of the dinghy, the dugong stopped, took a deep breath with its enormous nostrils located in the upper part of its muzzle, and gathering speed, hurled itself upon us. The dinghy could not avoid the blow. It almost overturned and was flooded by 1 or more tons of water, which had to bail out. Thanks to the skill of the mate, however, who had maneuvered to take the blow at an angle and not full on, we did not sink. Ned Land, crouched at the bow, kept belabouring the massive creature with blow after blow of his harpoon. The dugong had fastened its teeth on our gunwale and was lifting our boat out of the water as a lion would lift a deer. We fell over each other, and I don't quite know how this struggle would have ended if the Canadian had not succeeded, finally, in piercing the heart of that massive beast. I heard the grinding of its teeth on the iron gunwale, and suddenly the dugong disappeared, dragging the harpoon with it. But soon the barrel reappeared on the surface of the water, and a few seconds later the body of the animal, floating on its back, appeared also. I took pulleys of enormous power to haul the animal up onto the platform. It must have weighed around 11,000 pounds. It was quartered under the watchful eyes of the Canadian, who followed every detail of the operation. That evening for dinner the steward served me with some choice cuts which had been skillfully prepared by his chef. I found it excellent, even superior to veal, if not to beef. On the following day, the 11th of February, the larder of the Nautilus was further enriched with more delicious game. A flight of sea sparrows came to rest on the Nautilus. They were the species known as Sterna nilotica, particular to Egypt. They had black beaks, gray spotted heads, white spots around their eyes, grayish backs, wings and tails, white bellies and throats, and their feet were red. It's interesting in this book they have I guess no one did worry about this back when this book was written, but no one has any fear of extinction or harming rare species. Everything is viable game to them, which is interesting. But anyway, we also caught a few dozen Nile ducks, whose tails and the top of their heads were white with black spots. Their flavors were excellent. The Nautilus was now sailing at moderate speed. It was sauntering, so to speak. I noticed that the water of the Red Sea was becoming less and less salty as we approached the Suez. The first 4 chapters. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Got it. Toward 5 p.m., we sighted the Cape of Ras Mohammed to the north. It was this cape that forms the extremity of Arabia Patricia, situated between the Gulf of Suez and the Gulf of Aqaba. The Nautilus entered the Strait of Jubal, which leads into the Gulf of Suez. I saw clearly a high mountain towering over Ras Mohammed between the two gulfs. It was Mount Horeb, or Sinai, of whose summit Moses met God face to face, and which the mind of the people imagines to be continuously crowned with lightning. At 6 o'clock, the Nautilus, now on the surface and now under water, sailed past Tor, nestling on the end of the bay, whose water appeared tinted with red, and Captain Nemo had already predicted. Then night fell, and the deep silence was broken occasionally by the cry of a pelican and some night birds, and the sounds of waves beating. Resituate myself. Oh my gosh, where was I? Nestling on the end of the bay, whose water appeared to be tinted red, as Captain Nemo had already predicted. Then night fell, and the deep silence was broken occasionally by the cry of a pelican and some night birds, or the sound of waves beating against the rocks, or the distant wail of a steamer beating the waters of the Gulf with its propeller. Between 8 and 9 o'clock the Nautilus sailed a few yards below the surface. According to my reckoning, we should be very near Suez. Through the panels of the saloon I could see formations of rocks brilliantly lighted by our searchlight. The strait seemed to be getting narrower and narrower. At 9:15 the ship had come to the surface, and I kept up on the platform. Very impatient to pass through Captain Nemo's tunnel, I could not stand still, and I sought to breathe the fresh air of the night. Soon in the shadow I spied a pale light, veiled by the mist, shining about a mile away. "A floating lighthouse," someone said to my side. I turned and recognized the captain. See what I mean? The romantic tension? "It is the floating lighthouse of Suez," he continued. "We will not be long now to be reaching the entrance of the tunnel." "It cannot be easy to enter." "No, it isn't, monsieur. In fact, I always remain in the helmsman's cabin to direct the maneuver myself. And now, if you will be good enough to go below, Monsieur Arenat, the Nautilus is about to submerge, and will not return to the surface until we have passed through the Arabian Tunnel." I followed Captain Nemo. The hatch closed behind us, the tanks were filled with water, and the Nautilus submerged about 30 feet. As I was leaving him to return to my room, the captain stopped me. "Professor," he said, "would you like to accompany me to the pilot's cage?" "Yes, indeed. I didn't dare ask you," I replied. "Come then, and you will be able to see everything that is seen in the trip through an underground as well as an underwater channel." He led me toward the central staircase. There's also a few characters who are said to be Indian, but I don't dare attempt that. Also, a minor Scottish character that I did an accent for. Oh, I'm so excited. That's amazing. I followed Captain Nemo. The hatch closed behind us, and the tanks were filled with water. I read this. He led me toward a central staircase. Halfway down, he entered a door, crossed an upper gangway, and soon we entered the pilot's cage, which, as we know, stood at the far end of the platform. It was a cabin about 6 square feet, somewhat similar to the pilot's cabin on boats sailing the Mississippi and the Hudson rivers. At the center was a wheel, placed vertically and connected to the rubber chains, which ran to the stern of the Nautilus. 4 portholes with lenticular glass grooved into the walls of the cabin permitted the pilot to look in all directions. The captain was in darkness, but as soon as my eyes became adjusted to the darkness, I saw the helmsman, a vigorous man, whose hands were resting on the spokes of the wheel. Outside, the sea was vividly illuminated by our searchlight, located at the end of the platform. "Now," said the captain, "let us look for our tunnel." Electric wires connected the helmsman cabin to the engine room, permitting the captain to control both the speed and the course of the Nautilus. He pressed a metal button, and immediately the propeller slowed down. I watched in silence the sheer, high rock wall that we were skirting at that moment, and which formed a solid base for the coastal sandbanks. We followed it for an hour, gliding along only a few feet from it. Captain Nemo did not take his eyes off the compass and its 2 concentric circles installed in the cabin. Repeatedly, at a signal from the captain, the helmsman would change the course of the Nautilus. Standing at the port window, I saw some magnificent substructures of coral, zoophytes, algae, and some crustaceans lying on the surfaces of rocks, waving their enormous and elongated claws. At 10:15 p.m., Captain Nemo himself took the wheel. A wide, deep, black channel opened before us. The Nautilus plunged boldly into it. A A strange rustling sound could be heard along its sides. It was the water of the Red Sea, roaring through the sloping tunnel, flowing toward the Mediterranean. The Nautilus moved along its current, swift as an arrow, although the propellers were put in reverse to cut down our speed. On the narrow walls of the tunnel I could only see the brilliant rays, the straight furrows of fire, traced by the electric beams of our searchlight. I placed my hand to my chest and felt my heart beating fast. At 10:35, Captain Nemo left the wheel and turned to me. "The Mediterranean," he said. In less than 20 minutes, the Nautilus, swept along by its current, had passed under the Isthmus of the Suez. All right. So we made it through the secret tunnel and through chapter 5 of part 2 of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Okay, cool. So I'm going to stop right here. And let's mark in Storygraph what page we got up to in the book. I just opened my phone and this guy is looking at me. Dugong. I love him. My new favorite animal, honestly. Okay. $261. And we're officially 54% of the way through the book. So, pretty good. Over halfway. Thank you guys, everyone, for tuning in. And this video will be up on YouTube very soon. Okay. Bye.